Boy, I'm glad I ate my Wheaties. This thing is a beast to turn. It should be easy. It's a little HHR. We definitely have a problem with the power steering. Have no idea what it is. Why don't we take it into Tech Garage today, do some diagnostics repair on this Heritage high roof. Well, it's a great day for a high-tech how-to show. Welcome to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, we got our HHR, Chevrolet calls the Heritage high roof in the shop, and I'll tell you, it was a bear to turn. It took everything I had to get this thing to get into the shop. Well, I went under the hood like anybody else would and started to check the power steering system. Well, I looked under there, there's no power steering belt, there's no power steering pump, there's no power steering fluid. A little curious. Shimmied under the car, looked at the rack. It's not an electric power steering rack down there. Now I'm really curious, why is this thing so hard to turn? Well, I got up under the dash, and what I did when I went up under the dash, I took a peek, and there's actually an electric motor actually running on the column itself. So now I know, pretty cool, this is an electric column car. So there is no power steering, hence it's really hard to turn. What do we do next? Scan it. I got my handy dandy scanner here from rockauto.com, plugged it into the OBED 2 connector, and come up with the code C0550. Well, what's that all about? Well, a C code is a chassis code, kind of lead us in the right direction. We know it has something to do with the steering. If it was a P, that would be a powertrain, B would be body control, and U would be a network code. So I had to go do some research, man. Now it's time because this thing is all new. That's pretty cool stuff. I did some research and found a TSB, Technical Service Bulletin. What is that all about? Well, I like to kind of explain them as little quirks that go on with cars that the manufacturers know about. You can find them online as well. For example, maybe a car's squealing really bad and they upgrade the brake pads with a new part number. Maybe perhaps they just got a whole different programming for the car, and in our case, this one happens to be a pattern failure, and that code comes up a lot. So if you look at the Technical Service Bulletin, you can see right there, it says it's for our car, the C0550, it falls within our date, and also down on the bottom, here's the kicker. It says inspect the harness connector with the power steering control module. So I had to drop the kick panel. That was pretty easy, a couple of 7mm bolts, dropped the kick panel down, got under there, looked, it says there's no problem found. Ours was in good shape. So it says you have to replace the steering column only. So I started the job. I went ahead and disconnect the airbag. I let it time out, get it over there so it's good and safe. And then I scribed the mark down there. Hey Dave, what's going on?
John, no, that's the question I have for you. What's going on?
It's kind of a power steering deal under there, and there's no power steering come under the hood. So I found an electric motor on the column, some really cool technology. I'd love to show these guys. Take a peek on the column. It's really cool. Yep, it's neat, man. You'll see the big motor
cool. Yeah,
there.
I can see it right now.
See it?
Yep.
Isn't that something?
I love it.
Man, well, stay down there.
I've never seen one like that.
Yeah, stay down there, buddy, because I'll tell you what, we got a C0550, and the only thing to do is replace the whole column, man.
Thanks, John.
My knees were killing me. So you know what? I was kind enough, though, to pull the service manual information. They want us to pull the knee bolster. I did that. They want us to pull the module. I did that. I made the scribe, man. All the dirty work's done. Now all you have to do is there's a column bolt all the way down there. It's connected. 2 bolts. Hey, watch your head. That thing's going to drop down, hit you right in the head.
Yep, I see the column bolt, and you scribed a little mark on there.
Got it.
Yellow mark. Yep.
Awesome.
Very good.
And then you got about 9 million connectors and some paraphernalia under there. Just handle it. You got it under control, Dave.
All right. Let's see here. This is like every science fiction movie here. There's I should have yelled, "It's a trap! Get out of there!" All right, here we go. John's always got something for me like this to do. Here's right on the steering knuckle. John scribed that mark so we can get it set right. And there's also a black mark there where the splines from the steering shaft actually come into the knuckle. And we can set that right once we get it all set back up. It's a long run. There goes that bolt. And 2 more bolts on the steering column. I'm going to bet that this thing will come down on my head once I get this other bolt out here. So I'm hopefully putting enough resistance on it to keep from getting whacked here. Yeah, good, caught it. Yep, only about 487 connectors left to go. Oh yeah, there we go. Not getting hit in the head, that's my goal every day. We're gonna get these connectors undone and get this thing pulled out and put on the table, and John's gonna show you different kinds of power steering systems when we come back. The Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com. Stay tuned. Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, is brought to you by Steel Rubber Products, quality crafted rubber parts and weather stripping. Clamp Tight, the clamp making tool. And by RockAuto.com, all the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com. Well, Josh, it looks like Dave made short work of the steering column.
He did. Here's where he was showing you where the two bolts actually go to support the steering column. But as you can see, I still have some stuff to move over. The motor, the lock cylinder, the multifunction switch, and of course the steering wheel.
Well, it looks like you got a lot of work ahead of you, so why don't you get started? Get it over to Dave. We got a whole steering system to take a look at. Check this out. Let's talk about the evolution of steering. Now, the evolution of steering, we actually have a 66 Fury. Check that out, man. Pretty cool looking car. It employs an actual recirculating gearbox right here, or a gearbox that's down here. And you've seen these before. They turn to the right or left. You got a worm gear and a sector shaft. And then what you have is you have these idler arms. You have these all these different bushings. You got this tie rod end. And then what you have here is a whole ball joint assembly, adjusting sleeve. It's a parallelogram steering system on that old car. And guess what? Rock Auto has you covered. We got these 66 Fury parts from Rock Auto. And of course, Rock Auto even has the latest and greatest columns for the newest cars we'll show you in a second. Now, this is a rack and pinion. So we went from a parallelogram to a rack and pinion. Really simple. You got the pinion down here and the rack, and I can turn it. You see the pinion moves the rack back and forth. And right here is a spool valve that kind of directs fluid to one side or the other so you can have some power steering. Now, what you all came here for and what Tech Garage is all about is high tech. Electronic power steering. Let's go through the evolution right here. Well, first of all, it was electro-hydraulic. You can see it right there on the actual rack and pinion. And then our car, the HHR, actually employs this one right here, which is an electric motor on the steering column. But most cars actually have right there a fully blown electric steering system. Now, only on Tech Garage, I told you, you're gonna see a cutaway of one. How does it work? Now this is cool. You got a steering angle sensor right here. So as I turn the steering angle sensor, either this, and it has a torque sensor built in as well, no link to the column. Think about this for a minute. I'm turning to the right or left, sending a signal to the computer. Then the computer drives the actual unit. And here's a unit right here that we cut away. You're only gonna see on Tech Garage, folks. So what's going on here? Well, you got the computer electronics going on right here, and then the feedback's gonna come into here to this high power electric motor. Now the high power electric motor is driving this big, looks like a supercharger belt, which is really cool. And this is a belt tensioner. So this actually drives a small gear driving a big gear, which is giving us gear reduction, giving us the torque that we need. Also, when it drives it, it's gonna drive what's called this worm gear right here. There's the belt, drives this worm gear. Now that's what's moving your car. Well, then it comes over here to this feedback sensor, which is really cool because if I flip it back over, you can see here's our traditional rack and pinion. Now remember, we have no mechanical link to this, so this is just for feedback. Now this is pretty hard to drive because that's a heavy magnet permanent motor right there, and this is cool. So watch this. I'm gonna turn it to the right, look at that thing, man, and to the left. So what's going on? We're driving that motor. That motor's driving the shaft, and man, it goes back and forth, and we're getting feedback. Man, only on Tech Garage do you get to see the coolest demos and cutaways. Speaking of coolest, Dave's the coolest, but you know what? He's hanging upside down in the HHR. Let's see what's going on.
Special thanks to my buddy Josh for delivering the steering column. We've got those 3 bolts back in place, and I matched the index marks that John already made in there to make sure we had everything matched up correctly and headed in the right direction. And of course, we made sure we got those bolts in without bonking our head once again. There's a few connectors to do here. We've already got this blue one in here, and we will connect this to the control module, and the gray one is second. A nice click when those go in to make sure they're seated. Now we've got the kick panel support to put in here. There's 2 places where these connect. You see 4 holes. They match the 4 holes on the support. Now I'm just gonna put one in just for demonstration purposes so you can see how this goes on. I'll run this one down here. If I can unstick it from my flashlight, there we go. Magnets, here we go. All right. All right, and there's one of them there. And again, there's 3 other spots for the rest of the bolts here. But I want to show you the kick panel itself here just to save time. 3 clips on the top and 2 screws go in on the bottom. And there are 3 slots right across here where those tabs fit. So tab A into slot B in each case, and just kind of pound them in there. And again, you drive the 2 screws up and you are good to go. The only thing left is to test drive it to make sure we fix the problem. And we're going to do just that and a whole lot more when we come back to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com.
Welcome back to Tech Garage. It's Garage Ed time. And let's talk about springs and shock absorbers. First thing we need to do is understand, what are we checking for when it comes to the springs in the suspension system? Suspension system service. Well, we always see the pre-alignment inspection sheet. This is huge. Why? Well, it'll tell you a lot what's going on with the car, especially underneath the car. All starts out with that road test. Just be aware of what's going on. From 30 miles an hour, do some braking, check your tire pressure. Ride height of the car is super important, making sure the car's sitting right or the suspension's not gonna work. You come down to the rubber bushings. Dave showed you in a prior episode how to check all those. Your shock absorbers, you're doing a visual inspection to the steering linkage, whether it's a racket pinion or a parallelogram steering system. Just grab it, tug it, make sure it's in good shape. We're going to talk a little bit about ball joints today and how to check those. Our tires and wheels, you saw those earlier in the season. Look at the patterns and the wear patterns. And then brakes, make sure they're operating properly. And then we'll end up Garage Ed in a couple episodes with alignment. Look at those alignment numbers. But remember, your suspension system has to be in good shape prior to doing the alignment. Well, let's turn our attention to the shocks and the springs. Looking at some of these components across the table, very important. Whenever you're doing a loaded control arm, it's a lot easier. What do I mean by a loaded control arm? Well, RockAuto.com has one right here. Why do I want to do that? Well, I'm not messing with these bushings. Very hard to push in and out of here, and or the actual ball joint right here. Everything's in place. Time's money. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort to get this stuff out. Just replace the whole thing and you know your vehicle geometry will be in good shape. When it comes to shocks, replace your shocks as well. You do a good visual inspection, you'll see what's going on. Now, when it comes to actual McPherson struts or the strut systems, I highly recommend a quick strut assembly. What's a quick strut assembly? Everything all together right here. You see you got the spring, you got the strut assembly. Number one, it's dangerous to take this off. You have to have a spring compressor. Number two, time is money. You're spending all that extra time switching it over. It's going to cost you a lot of time and effort. And number three, ride height. We talked about that. The spring controls ride height. So you want to make sure that that's in good shape. The spring's going to do just that. Now, last but not least, we need to check the ball joints. And check this out right here. You have to understand what ball joint you're dealing with, either a follower or a load-carrying ball joint. Now, if the spring's in the middle, that makes the bottom one the actual load carrying and the top one the follower. Now, vice versa, if the spring's up on the top, it may switch around, so you have to know that. Now, right there, you can see the spring in the middle right there. What happened is you load it up, you're trying to separate those ball joints and take the tension off of them so you can check it. And then the other one, you can see the spring up on the top. Well, you got a support bar in there. Why? So when you jack it up, there's no tension on those two ball joints, so you can go in there and you can move it up and down. Heck, better yet, why don't we just check out Dave? He's checking the ball joints right now.
Well, John, here's what I'm doing here. I've got an adjustable arm dial indicator. I've got it hooked up to a spot on the frame. Now, you would normally do this on the ground. We've got the car up off the ground just for demonstration purposes. So again, mounted to a hard spot on the frame, not anywhere on the suspension where it's going to move. And then the other end here is on the bottom of the ball joint. Now, again, you're going to be down on the ground, just a few inches off the ground on a jack stand. We're going to pretend this jack is the ground, and just for demo purposes, you're going to use the ground, in this case the jack, as a lever. You move that tire up and down, and you get to check the amount of deflection on your dial indicator. Check your service manual to see how much deflection is allowable. If you've got too much, that means you need to replace your ball joints, like we did on this one that came into Tech Garage a few months ago. This thing was a mess. We ordered a new ball joint assembly from our friends at RockAuto.com. When we return to Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, we're going to see how to handle voltage drop in an automobile charging system. So you're going to get a charge out of that. Tech Garage, presented by RockAuto.com, is brought to you by BrothersTrucks.com, your #1 source for 1947 to 87 Chevy and GMC truck restoration. Magic Creeper, the most versatile creeper ever. And by RockAuto.com,
All the parts your car will ever need.
Welcome back to Tech Garage. It's the Master Technician Tech Tip time. Say that 3 times fast. Hey, it's all about the voltage drop. Don't freak out. Volts will simplify it for you. Let me show you why I don't like to use resistance to measure voltage drop. Well, I got these 2 wires here, and I'm going to switch over to ohms of resistance right down here. And I got these 2 wires. This one here, well, it's all frayed up. You would think this thing is full of resistance, but if I go across it, we've done this before on the show, pretty amazing. If I go across it right there, you can see I got about 0.2. That's not a lot of ohms of resistance. You would think you have a ton, but you're sure not going to pump any amps through that. Now, what's the difference? Here's a brand new wire. And if I go across this one, you can see, 0.1, 0.2, almost the same thing, no difference. Why? Well, the amps have to go through there, and if they can't go through there, it's going to burn it. So you don't want to use resistance, especially on high voltage circuits. Well, what do you want to do then? How about voltage? Use voltage in a term called voltage drop. Look at the meter. There's 2 ways to measure voltage. The first one, we're up at the top of the circuit down to ground. That's voltage at a point. But the second one over there, that's actually voltage drop. It's completely across the resistance or the load or whatever's going on in the circuit. So if you had a voltage drop there, and you're not supposed to, that's a problem. You don't want more than 5/10 of a voltage drop, 2/10 on the ground side, 3/10 on the positive side, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now, here's what's going on. See the light bulb there? It's actually going across the light bulb. That's dropping 6 volts. That's really not good. It should have dropped 12. Why did it drop 6? Look at the bottom. There's 6 volts right there in that wire. Well, it dropped 6 volts in that corrosion or resistance, and the light bulb only had 6 volts left, so it didn't burn bright. Not a good thing. Now let's do it on our charging system right here on the car so you can get a look at it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch over to volts. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go from the positive here over to the positive, but the car has to be running. Then I'm going to go from the negative here to the negative. So I'm staying on the same side of the circuit, and we're going to watch the meter. We don't want any more than about 1/2 of a volt. We got Benjamin inside the car. Benjamin, will you crank it up for us? Positive. About 0.5. There's a little bit there we'd have to address. Negative. About 0.1. So we would want to look at that positive side and see what's going on. But you know, it's a simple test. It's not as scary as you think it is. Get out there in your driveway and give it a try. Hey, for a few more tips when it comes to batteries and electrical, Tom and Dave has us covered.
Tom Taylor, I was on rockauto.com and I wanted to see how old of a car I could find on there. And I looked back and found a 1909 Model T, I think some engine gaskets and some bearings for it and stuff like that. And I'm just amazed. There are parts on rockauto.com ranging over a century, yet you guys still manage to keep up with the modern technology and all the latest. What are some of the things right now that are new on the market that rockauto.com has?
One of the newest things is the start-stop technology. You come to a stoplight, you stop the car and the engine turns off. And the car manufacturers want to make that as seamless as possible so the car doesn't stutter, your air conditioning doesn't get hot.
The first days of those, if you had a rental car that had that, you're like, what happened to my car?
Right. One of the things they did was add a second battery to some of their engines. And it like there are some Jeeps and Chevys, Mercedes, BMW. A good way to tell if you have this second battery is look under electrical battery at rockauto.com, and you'll see if you have an auxiliary battery choice among the bigger batteries that cost more. There'll be a smaller battery that costs less. That's the auxiliary battery. That's a clue that you have a second battery for your start-stop system. You could also look in the owner's manual to see, and look in the big owner's manual, not the smaller one, because the smaller one may say you have an enhanced battery, and it's like, yeah, that means a whole separate battery. So it takes a little research to find out where this second battery is.
Spanning a century of automobiles, rockauto.com has all the parts your car will ever need.
Repair, check. Verify repair, not so quick, Dave. Let me reach in here and see if we can get this thing running and see how easy it turns. Whoa, 1 finger.
Beautiful.
That's a 1 finger electric steering column. Dave, you are the man.
I'm not the man. Rock Auto supplied the part that enables you to turn that with 1 finger, so we got the job done.
No doubt about it. It's been a common theme throughout the season, man. A lot of electronics built into these cars. I mean, it gets a little bit scary.
It's a little bit scary, but it's cool. You know, you think about how far cars have come, even since we were kids. You know, everything was manual. You had manual window cranks and everything, and didn't even have air conditioning or anything. And now everything's electronic. You've got electronic power steering, the window controls, everything. The seats are controlled with electronics. These cars are loaded with them, and it's intimidating, but at the same time, I love learning new stuff. So, you know, as that stuff rolls out, you get to learn all these new technologies. That's why I love hanging out here at Tech Garage.
Absolutely. We had 255 AC. 2 windows down at 55 miles an hour.
Exactly right,
That was
yeah,
about
yeah.
it. But you know, it was a great show. That electric steering column, wow. I mean, cutaway and the insides of it. No control of the steering column scares me a bit, but you know, there's
no
more-
direct link, you mean?
No direct link, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm just turning the wheel and the computer's moving it, man.
Yeah.
But you know what? There's more fail-safe technology built into that than when it was hydraulic.
Well, and they do airplanes fly-by-wire now, and
Hello.
it's pretty reliable technology these days. That's pretty remarkable in and of itself.
Absolutely. Well, we had a great time today. I sure hope you did. Garage Ed, that was phenomenal with the service and the suspension service. We learned a ton, man. Put a voltmeter in our hand on the charging system, voltage drops. I think everybody's getting comfortable with a voltmeter. That's pretty cool. Highly technical, but always informative Tech Garage. Hey, make sure you're with us because we'll be back next week with more Tech Garage presented by RockAuto.com.